The first paragraph of a book is our opportunity to show the reader a spark of something, a hint at some buried depth, a smoke signal from later in the story, or a haunting narrative voice. Far easier said than done, of course, but the more we can learn about how to start a story, the better. I'm Kieran, I'm a writer and a freelance editor, and I asked my followers to send me their opening paragraphs for feedback. And once again, I'm going to talk about what I think they did well, what I think they could do better, and give an overall impression of their work. We're talking broad strokes here, by the way, not destructive analysis, and it's all just my opinion based on the paragraphs themselves with no other context. Except for a couple of these, actually, but you'll see what I mean in a bit. Huge thanks again to those of you who sent me your work. These submissions all came from my Patreon supporters, just like the last episode, and they're anonymous again, so I really appreciate it. Alright, let's get started with the first one. The last time she'd assumed human form, jails were small, dark cells, as likely to be below ground as above. The unlucky captured were thrown inside without hope or discussion. Alright, so this one I actually recognise from an editing project, so I suppose in this case I do have a bit of context for this, and I won't call out the writer, but hello. This one I'd say is probably on the shorter side for an opening paragraph, but I'm really glad because it gives me an opportunity to say, that's absolutely fine. There's no rules on length, just whatever the story calls for. We had some quite long ones in the last episode, so it's good to get some variation on that. But anyway, for its brevity, this opening paragraph still raises a couple of quite big questions, I think. Firstly, clearly the character, whoever the she refers to, isn't human for a start. Plus, they also have the ability, it seems, to take on other forms, and I think it's fairly impossible to not have some immediate questions about that. And like I said in the last episode, asking a question that the reader wants an answer to within your opening paragraph is generally a good option, I think. I think there's a sense of history here to me because the reference to jail cells appears to be from further back in time. At least that's how it appears to me anyway. That brings in one of my favourite words when it comes to all things writing, which is scale. It suggests that it's bringing in a longer story or a broader story. And then overall, I think the content of this is kind of playful in a way, and it might not seem it immediately, but if we look at it a bit closer, it kind of gives the insinuation that this character is in jail, if that's the right word, but it talks around it a little bit, leaving us to wonder why she might be there. That's asking a further question, giving us a further hook, so it's always good to have that. I'm cheating slightly here in that my suggestion is a little more informed on this one because I know the material, but what I would have said is just to make this paragraph a little longer. A short opening paragraph is fine, as I said, but in this case I think adding a bit more of the present to this, following what we have here up with something in the here and now, I think would be a good addition. But I know that the writer has likely done that in the next paragraph anyway to ground us into the present scene. Alright, so let's move on to the next one. The Rottweiler's intestines were dangling beneath it, dragging along the road. I looked out from the front door window of my childhood home as it meandered closer. Low grey skies sat behind it, but the ground itself was bone dry. The yellowish-green grass sat low and unmoving, as if there was no wind. So, this is an interesting one, and what stands out to me so far is contrast. You've got that really visceral detail about this poor dog and whatever's happened to it that's really bluntly and factually stated. I suppose this kind of mimics how nature makes no apologies for this kind of thing, I suppose. But then there's this sense of calm as well, the still grass and the dark sky but no rain. I think that creates a strange atmosphere really, and I mean that in a good way. It's a particular moment that we get pulled right into, and the stillness really helps to ground us straight into the story. There's questions here for sure, the obvious one being what's just happened to this poor dog, of course, but also the question, where is this taking place? I'm wondering about that because I'm getting a sense of isolation coming through too, with the quietness and the stillness, despite the scene being right next to the road. My first criticism here is kind of picky really, but it's just based around wording. To me, there's something a bit clunky about the phrase front door window to me. I think maybe we could just be standing at the open door, perhaps. That also might help with the other thing that I'd pick up on here, which is the character feels kind of passive. It's a very neutral feeling reaction for such a shocking sight, I think. So I'd like to maybe see more of a response to start building a sense of character for them. Other than those small bits, it's the atmosphere that grabs me here, which is always a good thing to have. We're flying through so far. On to the next one. The man blinked and then blinked again, trying to clear the blurriness. He took off his glasses and dug his fingers into both eyes, knowing this would help only for a little while. He'd been staring at the ledgers all morning trying to figure out these schedules, none of it making any sense. Not a particularly difficult task, he just couldn't focus this morning. Even though he'd just eaten, he was still hungry. Deciding to get up and move around, he stood up a little too fast and had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from swooning. After a few minutes, he felt okay and made his way out of the office. Head down and hands in pockets, he walked the halls. Others in the hallways have learned to steer clear of him when he's in a walking mood. He's typically just a garden variety asshole, but on the walking days, he can be a complete monster. Alright, so this is definitely more of a character-based opening, and as a character-based writer myself mainly, this is the direction I tend to go in. And I think by the end of these 2 paragraphs, because it is 2 really, but we won't worry about that, I think we really did get a sense of a character beginning to come out. That final line, I think, is the message that you're getting across with this opening. That's what I think the reader will take from it. And it's interesting, it raises questions, as do all of these openings really. Why is he like that? What's on his mind? Why can't he concentrate? In fact, I would suggest leading with that line or a modified version of it. I think it's a stronger opener, more attention grabbing, and it provides another of my favourite words when it comes to writing, which is context for the rest of what follows. If we know up front that this guy can be an absolute monster, then I think we'll be more interested in watching him working himself up to that. My main suggestion, other than swapping the last line to be the first one, is to maybe turn the temperature up a bit. Show us more of his temper coming through, these damn schedules. I'd definitely make his little faint moment a bit more intense as well. Make us wonder if he's driving himself to some kind of medical distress, or he might do shortly. Essentially, I think you've got what will be a compelling character and questions that you're asking here. Just lean into it a little bit more and let this garden variety asshole show through a bit more and you'll be set. On to the next one now, and this is also one I'm very familiar with from an editing project, but I will try to come at it from a neutral standpoint. Some flamboyant tune thumps out of a nearby speaker, but it's impossible to make out any words over the clickety-clanks and screams from the pop-up book fair rides. I walk aimlessly through a vortex of colour and sound as my tongue licks the shaft of a long floppy churro. With a defiant chomp, I tear off the tip and jaw smack this sugary glob like a Clydesdale. Meanwhile, some poor kid comes pounding down the ramp of the gravity starship looking pale as a corpse. He stumbles by me and plunges headfirst into a trash can as disgust and pity tug a war at my cinnamon-coated lips. Hurls incoming. I don't know whether the hurls incoming is a note from the author there or part of the actual paragraph, but anyway, as I said, this is another project that I've edited and I know this one well, as you could probably tell because I was chuckling a little bit as I read this, because it's funny. You can't fail to notice the tone here of light-hearted, cheeky humour, and when I tell you, earthy and somewhat visceral descriptions are this author's trademark, for sure. There's a very clear character voice from the narrator here, right from the off. The opening has clear personality, which I think is great. This is a good example of how a strong voice can make even something like a passive scene interesting. Not much is happening to the main character here, they're just observing, but it's still vivid and colourful. In the last video I mentioned how making a reader feel something is often thought of as writing something moving or grand or sad or poignant. But this serves as a reminder that even smaller details can make a reader feel something or have some kind of effect on them, and to do that in a first paragraph I think is a really good start. There isn't too much I'd really change here, to be honest, and while it may be tempting for the squeamish such as myself to suggest dialing back some of the earthiness a little bit, there would be no point in that suggestion really, as this is an accurate representation of the story to come. Again, I can't ignore the context that I know about here. One small thing I'd maybe change is the as in the last sentence, because I'm extremely picky about the word as. I've mentioned this in my videos and my editing clients will probably tell you. Here we've got this poor chap stumbling off this ride and heading for a trash can as disgust and pity hits our characters. When really, if I think about it, the disgust and pity would be a result of this guy hurling rather than something happening at the same time, wouldn't it? It wouldn't make you feel disgusted just to see him run down and go towards the bin. It would be after he starts hurling, I guess. I told you I was picky. Whatever the case, this is an impactful opening for sure. And whether you agree with me or not on these points, by the way, that's all right. If you don't agree with me, don't assume that you're wrong. or that I'm wrong. Reading is subjective, and keeping an open mind, I found, is often the best way to reflect on what we read and to learn to be better writers. I find that as well as helping me learn and develop my craft, doing that also helps me enjoy what I'm reading. It helps me find the value in approaches that I initially think I don't like, and in stories that I might not have otherwise chosen to pick up. All around, really worth doing. It takes real guts to send your work out to someone to critique, especially when that person is then going to throw it up in a YouTube video. So I really appreciate everyone who sent me paragraphs. If you're looking to send me your opening paragraph to be featured in a video like this, I'm opening up submissions shortly over on my email list or my Patreon. You don't have to be a paid member, but the paid members will get priority. So to submit your work, join up on either one and look out for a post or an email with a submission link coming soon. With that being said, thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.